Hello, I'm Darlene with Friends of Fairview. We're a nonprofit organization dedicated to preserving Fairview Cemetery right here in New Albany, Indiana, and preserving the legacies and the stories of the people that are buried right here. And the story I want to tell you today is the story of this little area right here. Do you see this little peninsula there? This area is called Babyland. And yes, it is exactly what it sounds like. This is the place where the babies are. You can see it is surrounded by daylilies, which, as you can see from the pictures I'm showing you, in the spring, it's lovely when the lilies are all in bloom. But yes, Babyland. And I'm sure most cemeteries have their own little Babyland spot, whatever they call it there. I don't know. But I want to talk about the babies today. We're going to focus our attention on the babies and tell their story. So let's go just a little bit closer. So as you can see, there's some steps right here that lead up to the little area known as Babyland. And all of the little monuments that are in this little peninsula area, these are all babies. Yes. As a matter of fact, the very first burial in Fairview Cemetery, which was called Northern Burial Grounds at the time, happened on July 31st, 1841. And this was the day after the cemetery opened. The cemetery opened on July 30th, 1841, and the very first burial took place on the next day, July 31st, 1841, and you guessed it, it was a baby, a child. In the burial records, the child is just listed as a Hatton child. So was an infant or a young child from the Hatton family. Yeah, just so sad, right? As a matter of fact, the data shows, the burial records shows that about 70% of the burials here in Fairview Cemetery, or Northern Burial Grounds at the time, in those early years were children, and about 60% of that 70% were children under the age of 5. So sad. Can you even just imagine all those mothers and families too? I mean, the fathers and aunts and uncles and grandmas and siblings would all grieve too, but the mothers, being a mother myself, I just know the connection, the bond that you feel with your children, and I know how devastating that would be to lose one. It would be a deep source of grief, and it would be a lot to work through. Yes. So I just think of those mothers, of all those little babies, and I just put myself in their place and know how hard that would be. And unfortunately, many of those mothers lost not just one child, but more, several, sometimes many. There was one mother who's buried here. Her name is Mary Ann Ayers. Her and her husband had 8 children, and all 8 of them, most of them, 5 of the 8 died when they were 3 years or younger. And then the other 2, 12, 15, and 19. So 19 is the oldest that any of their 8 children lived. Can you imagine how hard that would be? Yeah. So there were many reasons why infant mortality was so high during this time period, during the 1800s. And there are many reasons and factors that contributed to that. Illness being the #1 cause of infant death and early childhood death. But there were also other factors too. There was just poor hygiene, poor sanitation, just not the level of knowledge of germs and things like that that we have today, the medical technology, medical understanding that we have of many of the different diseases and illnesses that befell people during that time period. We now have ways we can treat that, and so people don't normally die from those things quite to the level that they did years ago. So we just have better medical knowledge and technology now as well, and that helps. Back in those days too, a lot of toxic things were in the environment. Lead, like lead paint and things like that. were in the environment back in those days too. Lead in even the cans, the canned goods that they had. You know, so there was a lot of contributing factors. Accidents was another one as well. But illness was definitely by far the main cause of death for infants and young children during that time period. There were several that were seen. When I was looking through the burial records, I was running across something called summer complaint. And when I was Googling that to find out what the heck that was, I found out it's really an acute form of diarrhea. It was a disease that occurred in babies and young children, mainly in the summer months, and it was caused from contaminated food and poor hygiene. And it led to the disease caused chronic diarrhea. So these babies just died of chronic diarrhea. And this was called summer complaint. And you'd see that listed in burial records. Another thing that was a big illness that caused a lot of infant deaths was cholera. Cholera, scarlet fever, typhoid fever, smallpox. These were the main illnesses that contributed to most of the infant deaths, were these I just listed. And I can't even imagine how hard that would be as a mother to just watch your baby grow so ill and then pass away. And I know mothers have that today. They deal with their children getting ill, some cancer in the hospitals, how hard that would be. My heart goes out to mothers that are dealing with the illness and death of a child. I can't even imagine. I can only imagine how hard that would be as a mother myself, and how heartbroken and the loss I would feel were that to occur to any of my children. But back in the days, though, back in these days, in the 1800s, it happened so much more frequently because of all the reasons I just stated. So it was a rare mother, actually, during this time period that could go all the way through their childbearing years and not have lost at least one child. Yes, and not have lost at least one. I can't imagine. So sad, right? And so I just want to take a second now and just remember the babies. All those babies that were lost, that are buried here all around the cemetery. And the mothers who grieved them, who grieved their loss and mourned them. Let's just take a second and just remember the babies and the mothers. So I guess the thought I just want to leave us all with this video, not only just to honor the babies and the mothers and just to tell their story and just remember the tragedy, the loss, the heartbreak, and just be with that, with them in their suffering. Just the thought that no matter how brief a person's life was, each life has value. Each life was valid. Each life was worth, it was priceless, was worth more than can even be fathomed, right? Just priceless. And no matter whether that life was just a day, maybe they didn't even make it to be born. Maybe they were born inside the womb, or died inside the womb, or just lived a few days, or just a few hours, or maybe a few months, or maybe a few years, or however long. Each person's life had value, no matter how short it was, or long it was, or any of that. So these ones right here behind me, and so many more in this cemetery, they never got to grow up. They never got to get married. They never got to just have that full life that we always think about as parents that we want for our children, right? They didn't get to have that. So does that mean their life didn't have value or wasn't worth anything because they didn't get to live that long and full life that we think should have happened, right? That if a person is born, they have a right to a long life. And we all know that life doesn't work that way. Whether we wish it were true or not doesn't matter, right? No, life is going to continue to do its life thing. And the fact is that people of all ages die every single day, from babies all the way up to people in their 90s and hundreds. Every single day, people die at every age. As we can see here, right? They're a testament to that fact of life, that just because a person is born doesn't guarantee that they get to live a long life. But nevertheless, their time here on this planet was valid and worthwhile. They brought joy to the families that they were here, that their own families for as long as they were here. It was worth their journey to this planet, no matter how long their stay was. We got to treasure them and enjoy them and learn from them in the time that they were here. And that I would consider a beautiful and successful use of your life. So with that, I will leave us here and wish you all a beautiful day. And until the next time, goodbye.